The humid Kentucky night clung to Tanya Rollins as she pulled her rented sedan into the BP off Interstate 65, just outside of Bowling Green. It was a little past 11:30 p.m., the kind of hour when the world felt hushed, when most people were either asleep or settling in for the night. She'd been driving for hours from her cousin's place in Nashville, windows cracked, music a low hum, just trying to breathe in the stillness after a week of noise and family. She wasn't in uniform, didn't want to be noticed, didn't want to explain who she was, what she did, or why she was always gone. Just a tank of gas, maybe a bottle of water, then home to her own quiet. She wore black joggers, a comfortable hoodie, and running shoes, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, face clean, no makeup, no pretense. No attitude. No noise. The gas station lot was nearly empty, just a dusty white sedan near the air pump and a beat-up pickup truck parked near the side, its engine ticking softly as it cooled. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, casting a harsh, flat glow that made everything look slightly artificial. Tanya slid her card into the pump, punched her zip code, and leaned against the car, the rhythmic clunk-clunk of the gas filling her tank a mundane comfort. That's when the cruiser rolled in. Blue lights flickered on before the car even stopped moving, casting a disorienting pulse across the otherwise still lot. Tanya glanced up, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She didn't move, just stood there, one hand resting lightly on the nozzle, watching. Officer Kemp stepped out fast. White male, maybe late 30s, stocky build, buzz cut. A flashlight was already in his hand, its beam cutting through the bright station lights as if the night were truly dark. His tone was sharp, right out of the gate. Is this your vehicle? Tanya blinked. Yes, I'm just getting gas. I need you to step away from the vehicle. His voice was devoid of inflection, a command rather than a request. She didn't argue. She set the nozzle back in the pump, closed the tank, and stepped back with her hands visible at her sides, palms open. What's going on, officer? She asked calmly, her voice even, controlled. Just following up on a call, he replied, circling her car, his flashlight beam dancing across its rental plates. He stopped behind her, peering through the rear window. You seem suspicious. Suspicious? Tanya looked around. No one else was watching. No one had approached her. No clerk outside, no other customers. Just her, the gas pump, and a cop who already had a story in his head, already writing the narrative before she'd even uttered a full sentence. She tried again, her patience stretching thin but holding. I'm passing through. I rented this in Nashville. Do you need my license? But he didn't answer. He was behind her now, shining his flashlight through the back window, then her front windshield. Then, without asking, without so much as a glance at her, he opened the driver's door. Hey! What are you doing? She asked, her voice still measured but firm now, a clear boundary drawn. I need to search the vehicle. Without a warrant. That did it. The line. In a flash, he turned back to her, his face tight with indignation. I'm asking you to cooperate right now. You're being combative. Tanya froze. This was the moment, the delicate precipice. Cross it, and things spiral. I'm not being combative, she stated, her voice quiet but resolute. I'm asking a legal question. Turn around, he commanded. He grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly tight. Wait, she began, but before she could speak again, he yanked the other one, twisting her arms behind her back. In a flash, her face was pressed against the cold metal hood of her own rental car, her wrists cuffed tight. Her cheek felt the chill, the gritty texture of dust on the paint. A pickup truck pulled out of the lot, its engine a low rumble, quietly leaving the scene. No one stepped in. No one asked a thing. Tanya didn't cry, didn't scream. She stared at her own reflection in the side mirror, watching her chest rise and fall, watching herself breathe, a primal act in a moment stripped of dignity. You're being detained for suspicious behavior and failure to comply, Officer Kemp muttered, more to himself than to her, his voice clipped with triumph. In the back of the cruiser, she said nothing. She watched Bowling Green blur past through the rear window, mind spinning not with fear, but with a cold, calculated awareness. She'd seen worse. She'd been dropped behind enemy lines in northern Syria, crawled through dry riverbeds in Djibouti, faced men who'd rather die than surrender. But this was personal. And it was happening at home. At a gas station. She had no idea that this quiet, mundane stop would turn into a courtroom war that would shake the whole town. The cruiser pulled into the Bowling Green police station just after midnight. Tanya sat still, cuffed, her head leaned back against the seat. Her wrists hurt, not from the pressure of the metal, but from the raw, humiliating insult of it all. Officer Kemp didn't say a word as he opened the back door. She stepped out on her own, her movements calm, quiet, betraying nothing of the churning storm within. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh, buzzing with an indifferent hum. A young black officer sat behind the desk, glancing up immediately. His eyes, quick and assessing, clocked Tanya's athletic build and the way she carried herself, not like a criminal, but like someone used to calling the shots, someone with an intrinsic sense of purpose. "What's the charge?" he asked, tapping keys on his computer without looking away. "Resisting questioning, interfering with a lawful search," Kemp replied, trying to sound casual, his voice a flat, bureaucratic monotone. Tanya didn't react. She just looked around the room, faded police posters on the walls, a vending machine buzzing near the corner, the tired smell of old coffee and dust. A sense of detached observation settled over her. "Name?" The officer at the desk asked her directly, his tone neutral. "Tanya Rollins." "Middle name?" "Danielle." "Date of birth?" She gave it, no hesitation, no attitude, just facts, delivered with the precision of someone trained to compartmentalize emotion. "Ever been arrested before?" "No." The typing stopped for half a second, then resumed. A female officer was called in to pat her down, standard procedure, they said. Tanya cooperated, raising her arms, keeping her expression neutral, her mind miles away, somewhere over the Syrian desert, calculating distances, threats. "You carrying anything sharp?" the woman asked, almost under her breath, her voice softer than Kemp's. Tanya glanced at her. "Why do you ask?" The officer shrugged, almost embarrassed. "Your posture." Tanya gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, then looked away. No reason to explain more. They took her prints, took her mugshot, then led her to a holding cell, a grim, narrow box with a cold metal bench, one toilet, and walls so close she could stretch her arms and touch both sides. She sat, crossed one leg over the other, and closed her eyes. She'd been in tighter spots, endured far greater physical discomfort. Yet, it wasn't the walls that pressed on her chest now. It was the crushing weight of knowing that this wasn't about anything she'd done. It was about what he saw, a black woman in the dark, alone, with a quiet confidence that apparently needed to be challenged, broken. They let her sit in the cell for almost 2 hours before anyone said another word to her. At 2:04 a.m., a knock on the bars. "You're being released. Charges are being filed. You'll be notified of your court date." She stood up slowly, stiffly. "Where's my car?" "Impounded for further investigation," Officer Kemp answered from behind the hallway, his voice still laced with that quiet triumph. "You took my rental." He just smirked. "Drive safe next time." No apology. No explanation. They gave her back her phone, her wallet, and her watch, but not the rental keys. Not even a cab voucher. Tanya stepped outside into the humid night, her breath catching in the oppressive heat. She walked down the block and sat on a bench in front of a closed laundromat, the only light coming from a distant street lamp. Her phone battery was low. She called her cousin. "I need you to come get me." "What happened?" "I'll explain later." The ride back to Nashville was silent. Tanya stared out the window, the world a dark blur. Her cousin, Yanel, glanced over occasionally but didn't push. When they pulled into the driveway, Tanya paused before getting out, a fierce resolve setting in. "I need a lawyer," she said quietly. "You sure?" "I'm very sure." But she wasn't just preparing to defend herself. She was preparing for war. Because something told her this cop didn't just lie on paper. He lied like it was nothing, like it was a part of the job. 2 weeks later, Tanya walked through the courthouse doors wearing a tailored navy blue suit and a simple silver necklace. No medals, no sign of rank, just clean lines, polished shoes, and quiet strength. She wasn't there to impress, She was there to make something clear. She wasn't afraid. The courtroom was small, a local circuit courtroom on the second floor of a brick government building off Chestnut Street. The kind of place where traffic tickets and noise complaints got handled right alongside serious charges, because small towns didn't separate things the way big cities did. Her lawyer, Kendra Sloan, met her outside the courtroom. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, thick curls, and the kind of calm that came from knowing exactly what she was doing. "You ready?" Kendra asked, slipping a folder under her arm. "I've been ready," Tanya said. They walked in together. A few rows of benches, wooden panels on the wall, a tired-looking judge with glasses low on his nose already reviewing a docket. Officer Kemp was already seated, wearing his pressed uniform and a confident smirk. He didn't look at Tanya. He didn't need to. He thought the work was already done. The judge called the case, Commonwealth of Kentucky versus Tanya Rollins. Kendra stood. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty on all counts." The prosecutor, a man named Philip Dorsey, nodded slightly and adjusted his tie. "We're prepared to move forward, Your Honor. Officer Kemp has submitted his report and body cam footage." "Correction," Kendra interrupted, her voice cutting clean through Dorsis. "The department claims the footage from Officer Kemp's body cam is unavailable due to technical failure." The judge squinted. "Unavailable?" Dorsey cleared his throat, a nervous sound. "There was a malfunction, Your Honor. However, we have his written report and dashcam video." Tanya's eyes didn't flinch, but inside, her pulse kicked. This was the beginning of something deeper than just bad luck. Kemp sat straight, hands folded in his lap, eyes still avoiding hers. Kendra continued. "We're filing a motion to obtain all internal communications regarding this so-called malfunction, and we're requesting access to the dashcam footage and dispatch logs from that night." "Motion granted," the judge replied, his tone dry. "Next hearing set for 3 weeks from today." They adjourned. But as people began filing out, Tanya stopped in the hallway. She turned to Kendra. "They're covering something." Kendra nodded. "Yeah. And it's not the first time Kemp's footage has gone missing." Tanya's brow furrowed. "How many times?" "For that we know of." That's when it started to click. This wasn't about one bad night. This was about a pattern. A man who knew how to use the badge. A system that didn't ask enough questions. As Tanya and Kendra Sloan stepped outside into the sunlight after that first frustrating hearing, Tanya felt the familiar Kentucky heat press down on her. The courthouse steps were familiar ground for many, but this time, a new face caught her eye. A woman sat there, early 30s maybe, holding a baby on her hip, looking at Tanya with a flicker of recognition that wasn't from the evening news. "You the one Kemp arrested at the gas station?" the woman asked, her voice soft but direct. Tanya paused. "Yeah." The woman looked down at her child, then back at Tanya, a shared understanding in her eyes. "He pulled me over last year. Told me I fit the description. Took me in too. Said I was belligerent. I was just scared." Tanya's jaw tightened. "What happened?" "Dropped the charges. But it stayed on my record for 6 months. Lost my job over it." Kendra stepped closer, her expression hardening. "Do you remember the date?" The woman nodded. "I still got the court papers." Tanya met her eyes, a silent connection forming between them. "Hold on to them. You might be hearing from us." They exchanged names. Charlene Knox. Another piece of the puzzle, a chilling confirmation that this was far from an isolated incident. That day, standing on the courthouse steps under the hot Kentucky sun, Tanya realized she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was about to drag a lot more truth into the light. A week after that first hearing, Tanya sat in her cousin's backyard, the morning air sticky with humidity. Her sleeves were rolled up, her phone in one hand. Birds cut through the quiet, their chirps a stark contrast to the churning thoughts in her head. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She had scrolled past his name 3 times already, the gravity of the request weighing on her. Finally, she hit dial. "Rollins," came the familiar voice. Steady, direct, no small talk. "Commander Jensen," Tanya answered, her voice firm. "I need a favor, and I hate asking." He didn't skip a beat. "You wouldn't be calling if it wasn't serious." She explained everything in short, clean lines. What happened at the gas station, the missing footage, the frustrating courtroom, the officer with a trail of malfunctions behind him. He listened without interruption, a silent, powerful presence on the other end of the line. "I'm not asking for medals or headlines," she said, her voice raw with a desperate need for validation. "I just need the truth on record. Who I am. What I've done. They're painting me like I'm a threat, like I lost control." He was quiet for a second, then his voice came back, firm and decisive. "I'll send the files, but I'm going one better." Tanya held her breath. "What?" "I'm coming to the hearing." She exhaled slowly, the tension she hadn't realized she was holding melting away. "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is. You earned it. And people need to see who you really are." 2 days later, Tanya walked into the second hearing with her posture sharp and her lawyer by her side. This time, the courtroom had more people. Word had started to spread, first among friends, then on local Facebook pages. People were starting to ask why this woman, who had no criminal record, was being dragged through court over a gas station stop. In the back row, Commander Elias Jensen sat in full Navy dress uniform, his ribbons telling stories without words. Combat tours, humanitarian deployments, years of dedicated service. He stood up when she entered, gave a short nod. Tanya didn't smile, but her jaw set a little firmer, a subtle defiance. The prosecutor opened by repeating Kemp's report. Same phrases, same script, non-compliant, refused to answer, raised her voice. Kemp sat in the witness box again, reciting his version of events with the practiced calmness of a man who had done this more than once. Kendra waited until he finished, then she stood, her voice cutting through the stale air. "Officer Kemp, did you know Miss Rollins is a Navy SEAL commander with 14 years of service?" He blinked, caught off guard. "No. Did she tell you that during the stop?" "No. Did you ask?" "No." Kendra took a slow step forward, her voice laced with incredulity. "Officer Kemp, would you consider it normal for someone trained to lead combat units in foreign war zones to threaten an officer during a traffic stop over gas?" Kemp hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "I don't judge people by their resume." "Good. Let's judge you by your actions instead," Kendra replied, her voice flat, unwavering. "You claimed she was aggressive. Did she strike you?" "No." "Did she yell?" "She raised her tone." "Raised her tone?" Kendra repeated, a hint of disdain in her voice. "Was there anyone else around to verify that?" "No. Because your body cam didn't work again." "That's correct," Kemp muttered, his eyes darting. Kendra walked to the evidence screen and clicked to open a document. It was a scanned personnel file, Tanya's military history, deployment dates, commendations, training records, all signed and sealed by the Department of Defense. "This is Ms. Rollins' official record. Commander Elias Jensen is present in court today and prepared to testify on its authenticity." The judge turned to look. Jensen stood, his presence filling the room. "That record is accurate. She's one of the most disciplined officers I've ever worked with." Kendra continued, her voice gaining momentum. "So let's review. A woman with over a decade of experience managing high-risk operations was stopped at a gas station, said nothing threatening, made no physical move, and was arrested for appearing what? Too calm." The courtroom was silent. Tanya sat still, not gloating, not angry, just present, absorbing the shift in the atmosphere. The judge cleared his throat. "We'll take a brief recess before moving forward." Outside, Tanya stood by the steps again. She didn't need fresh air, she needed space to think. Yanel joined her with a bottle of water. They looked real uncomfortable in there. "They should be," Tanya said quietly. Jensen walked up beside them. "You didn't have to come," she told him again. "Yes, I did," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You were always the one stepping in for others. It's your turn." But Tanya knew the fight wasn't over, not even close. Because men like Kemp didn't fold after one hearing. They doubled down. By the third hearing, Officer Kemp's voice wasn't as confident. His lines were still rehearsed, the same script he'd clung to, but something in his eyes flickered, like he wasn't sure the story was holding anymore. Kendra Sloan, on the other hand, came in prepared, a quiet storm building behind her calm demeanor. Over the past 2 weeks, she had filed open records requests, talked to past defendants, and tracked down 3 more people, all with stories that sounded eerily, chillingly familiar. Late-night stops, vague charges, technical failures, and all quietly dismissed after court. One of them, a middle-aged white man named Gerald Simons, had been pulled over for a broken taillight. No record, no warrants, yet he was cuffed and booked for suspicious behavior. Charges dropped. Footage lost. Another, Jayla Boston, a high school teacher, was arrested outside of Walgreens for loitering after arguing over a defective receipt printer. Footage gone. In court, Kendra laid it all out in a methodical, relentless rhythm. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and cutting through the courtroom's heavy air, "these cases show a pattern of behavior by Officer Kemp that cannot be ignored. Repeated arrests with missing footage, repeated language used to justify detaining people with no cause." The judge raised an eyebrow, his gaze fixed on Kemp. "You're saying this officer has been systematically abusing his authority?" Kendra didn't flinch. "Yes, Your Honor. And my client isn't the first." Philip Dorsey, the prosecutor, tried to object, but the judge waved him off. "We'll allow it. Continue." That's when she brought up the dispatch logs from the night Tanya was arrested. Her voice slowed, each word deliberate, calm. "On the night of my client's arrest, Officer Kemp reported a suspicious individual at Pump 3. But there were number 911 calls made about her. No Clark complaint, no witness statement. Nothing. He initiated the stop on his own." Kemp started shifting in his seat, a telltale fidget that hadn't been there before. "Furthermore," Kendra said, tapping her papers, "the gas station's internal surveillance system records 30 days of video. And they were willing to release that footage." She looked at Tanya, then at the judge, a quiet triumph in her eyes. "We have the tape." She pressed play on the courtroom monitor. There it was. Tanya, standing still, calmly pumping gas. No threats. No yelling. Just quiet body language, her back to the camera. Then the cruiser, pulling up. Then the stop. The cuffs. Not once did Tanya resist. In fact, she barely moved. The courtroom fell into a silence so thick it felt like no one was breathing. When the video ended, Kendra looked back at Kemp, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, yet cutting like a knife. "You filed a false report. Did you think no one would double-check?" Kemp looked at the judge, then the floor, then back at Kendra, his face pale. "That footage. I didn't know they had exterior video." "You're trained to assume every business has cameras," Kendra shot back. He didn't answer. Kendra leaned closer, her voice dropping to a low, powerful register. "You don't get to guess your way through someone's life, officer." The judge leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I'll need time to review everything," he said, his voice grim. "We'll reconvene next week." Tanya stood slowly. She felt the stares behind her now, not judgment, but curiosity, awareness. The crowd was growing at every hearing. Journalists had started showing up. A young reporter from Louisville had even asked for an interview on the courthouse steps. She declined. This wasn't about a headline. Outside, as they walked toward the parking lot, Kendra finally exhaled, a long, deep breath of relief. That tape. That was the nail. "Maybe," Tanya said, a flicker of something guarded in her eyes. "But nails can be pulled. They'll fight back." "Yeah, but now it's public." But public didn't always mean justice, and Tanya had learned long ago that the most dangerous enemy is the one who feels cornered. That night, Tanya sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, a pile of notes scattered beside it. The air smelled of reheated coffee and old sweat. She hadn't changed out of her clothes from court, didn't feel the need to. Yanel stood at the counter, watching her with quiet concern. "You're not sleeping again." "I will," Tanya murmured, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Just not yet." A pause stretched between them. "You still think he's going to walk?" Tanya looked up, her gaze steady, resolute. I think the system wasn't built to stop him. I have to break it first. The very next morning, Kendra Sloan filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, attaching every statement, every video, every court transcript they had. She copied it to the State Attorney General's office. Within hours, 2 local reporters picked up the story, and by lunch, Tanya's name was trending on Kentucky Twitter. But with attention came pushback. The police department released a terse statement. We are aware of the allegations and are conducting an internal review. The local police union posted a vague defense of officers working under pressure and doing their best. Officer Kemp, incredibly, was still on duty. The next court date was packed. People stood in the hallway because the benches were full. Charlene Knox was there, her face a mask of determined solidarity. So was Jailer Boston, and even Gerald Simons. Tanya spotted a few off-duty officers too, standing in the back, arms crossed, their expressions unreadable. Before the session began, Kemp walked past Tanya and muttered under his breath, "You think you've won something? You're nobody here." Tanya didn't look at him, her gaze fixed forward, and simply replied, "You ever been hunted, Kemp?" "I have. And they tried harder than you." He didn't respond, his stride faltering, a flicker of fear in his eyes. Inside, the judge wasted no time. After reviewing all evidence, including the damning surveillance footage and the meticulous compilation of past reports, he spoke. "I find the defendant not guilty on all charges." The room held its breath for one profound second. "Furthermore," he continued, his voice ringing with authority, "I'm recommending a full investigation into Officer Kemp's conduct and the department's failure to address repeated complaints." Tanya didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She just closed her folder and stood up. The moment wasn't joy, it was a profound relief, not for herself, but for the people behind her, for the truth that had finally seen the light. Outside, a dozen cameras waited, a hungry pack. Reporters called her name, mics stretched out over shoulders. She raised a hand. "I won't be giving a statement right now. This isn't about me. It's about what happens next." One young reporter shouted, "Are you planning to sue the city?" Tanya paused, thoughtful. "I'm planning to hold people accountable," she stated, her voice unwavering, however far that needs to go. The crowd parted for her as she walked down the steps, Kendra at her side, her cousin waiting near the sidewalk, keys in hand. But one face stopped her. Commander Jensen, again. Same posture, same expression of quiet pride. This time, he stepped forward and shook her hand in front of everyone. "You carried yourself with honor," he said, his voice deep and sincere, just like always. "Thank you, sir," she replied. He nodded once, then walked away. That evening, Tanya sat on the porch, her feet up on the railing, a cold bottle of water resting on her knee. Yanel sat beside her, phone in hand. "They're talking about you on the radio now. Even got picked up by a station out in Cincinnati." "I didn't ask for any of this," Tanya muttered. "Nope," Yanel said softly, "but maybe it asked for you." That sat heavy between them. Tanya looked out across the street. Kids were playing, their laughter a distant echo. 2 neighbors waved, the same ones who hadn't said anything 2 weeks ago. Funny how fast silence turns into recognition. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kendra. "You changed something today. Don't forget it." Tanya leaned her head back against the chair. She hadn't planned to fight a war in her own backyard, but when the fight came to her, she did what she'd always done, stood her ground and never blinked. But now came the hardest part, making sure the next woman didn't have to fight this battle at all. 2 months later, Officer Bradley Kemp was placed on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation. No charges yet, but the whispers in the department had changed. He wasn't untouchable anymore. The city council scheduled a public forum. Tanya was invited to speak. She almost didn't go. She wasn't a politician, and she hated podiums. But Yanel looked her dead in the eye and said, "You walked through fire in silence. Maybe it's time they hear your voice." So she went. The community center gym was packed, folding chairs, people standing against the walls, camera crews along the back. Tanya stood at the front in jeans and a plain black shirt, no script, no speech, just her hands gripping the mic stand. Her voice was steady, resonant. I didn't come here tonight because I wanted attention. I came here because something broke, and it didn't start with me. I was arrested for pumping gas, not because I was loud, not because I was dangerous, but because someone saw me and made a decision based on what they thought they saw. She scanned the room. Some nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. I've served my country for 14 years, led missions overseas, seen real danger, real threats. What happened to me wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. And I'm not the only one. You've heard from others. You've seen the footage. You know the truth now. A woman in the crowd shouted, "What do we do about it?" Tanya held her stare. Start by believing people. Then hold the right folks accountable. And stop pretending this only happens in other places. It happened right here. The room erupted in applause, not a standing ovation, just something quieter, real, honest. That night, Tanya finally let herself rest. No more lawyers, no more hearings. She took her boots off and sat barefoot on the floor in Yanel's living room, sipping hot tea and watching the ceiling fan spin. "You good?" Yanel asked from the couch. Tanya gave a slow nod. "Yeah. For the first time in a while, I think I am." Her phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail from Charlene Knox. "I just wanted to say thank you. Because of what you did, they reopened my case. They're clearing my record." Then another message, this one from Jayla. "My students were watching. I told them I knew you." One of the girls cried, said she never knew someone like us could win like that. Tanya listened, then put the phone face down on the floor. She didn't need to reply, not tonight. She closed her eyes and thought about that gas station, about the moment Kemp grabbed her wrist, about the long walk from the courtroom, through the courthouse doors, past the cameras, and into a version of her life she never asked for but didn't back away from. That's the thing about people like Tanya. They don't run from storms. They study the wind, they find their footing, and then they walk straight through. Because dignity doesn't shrink for anyone. Not for uniforms, not for liars, not for fear.